I'm excited to be here and have the esteemed guest with us. Um, and let's begin. Um, so these are currently we are facing some tough times, right? There was an era which was pre-COVID or even during COVID, with a lot of boom in VC funds. Startups were getting money left, right, and center, and now it's turned almost 180 or 180 degrees. When we are seeing slowdown in the economy, slowdown in funding, slowdown overall. Um, I would love to get some thoughts on how has the risk management strategy really changed for companies during COVID, before COVID, and now. Um, and can we start with Edna? Would love to know your thoughts.
Great. Thank you so much, Pritesh. Really honored to be part of the conversation today. I think risk management has been evolving over the last 5 years to mesh with security, right? The security folks are starting to begin to speak the language of business and risk management. And so there's been a natural alignment. I think what you saw during COVID was the need for swifter conversations and tighter alignment, perhaps that escalated that timeline and made it more swift than it might have happened if we had allowed it without COVID. So for me, what I think we're talking about and what I'm seeing broadly now is folks are looking at the reality of the hybrid workplace. It existed before. We were well aware of it. It's just the uptick in the volume of utilization of hybrid and the reality that post-COVID, lots of folks have asked employees to come back, but they're not. And so it's a reality that we have to look at regularly. I think we also need to recognize something that COVID opened our eyes to a little bit more. Some of us have been working on it for 42 years or so, but it was the supply chain aspects. So leveraging the third-party ecosystem that we count on, I'm not sure we were as focused on the security risks. We were focused on things like, are they delivering? Is the service available? Are they driving the kind of innovation we want? But availability, when you live in a digital platform, is inevitably and intrinsically linked to the reality of security. So what I have seen as a bigger shift is a focus on third parties and trying to partner with them on what security you expect from them and what empirical data you're looking for from them to prove that they are in fact adhering to the kinds of baseline security controls that you expect of them.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Matthew, do you want to add something to it?
Yeah, with the economic downturn, it kind of throws that wrench into the system. But if you think about our world, cybersecurity, we are trained to deal with the ambiguous situations, with the left hook coming out of nowhere, with those surprise kind of events. So for, seasoned leadership in cybersecurity, an economic downturn is just another situation that we should be fairly comfortable and going, okay, it's going to be a challenge, but we know how to deal with challenges. We know how to deal with, threats getting bigger and budgets potentially getting smaller. So the first thing that we, need to realize is there shouldn't be huge panic. This is the type of situation that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And we have to approach it with that same level of calmness, the strong methodologies and logic to, again, optimize our resources, justify value, target what needs to be targeted, right, to be able to manage the overall risk. We know we can't solve everything. Even if we were given unlimited budgets, we can't solve everything. So, the first step is really to understand it's not time to panic. It's time to get better at the very skills and processes that we're already good at.
Pritesh, you're on mute.
Yep, Pritesh.
Sorry about that. Uh, thanks for calling it out, Edna. Matthew, I think that's a great point, especially given that this is not the first time. Thankfully, this is not the first time we're seeing it. We've seen the precedent of a recession, a downturn in the past. It's not a pleasant experience, but at least we've been there, done that, and panic is the last thing for any org or any company. Just to close off on that, Howard, have you seen any recent trends around the risk management side of things?
The biggest trend I honestly see is a lot more interest in risk management. So for me, managing risk in a downturn doesn't change how we do risk management. We still have to do risk management in the same way we've done it for many years previously. It just requires, I think, a bit more focus and concentration for sure. But the trends I see are people are talking about risk management more, not just with respect to cybersecurity, but broader operational risk and things like, risk management's been around in financial services for many, many years. I think they're the most advanced industry with respect to risk management, but other industries are kind of catching on. They understand that there's economic risk, there's employee risk, and there's things that are, out of our control, things like pandemics, right? That just, you never know, things just happen, right? Previous experience in one of my prior roles was dealing with the effects of Hurricane Sandy, right? It had tremendous impact. People cared about business continuity, but it was never a priority. Well, the day before this hurricane hit, it became a very high priority, right? So, you manage it. You manage it like we do everything else. So I just consider it just another day in our world, in our business.
Pritesh, can I jump in for a minute and pick up on something that I think Howard said, which is we're focusing more on it. And I think I've also seen a shift to his point where we're moving beyond thinking about business continuity and we're actually thinking about operational resilience. There are new platforms that have come out to think about this. What excites me about that is we used to have pockets, right? So you'd have supply chain people who are worried about continuity of supply, and you had security people who are worried about, let's say, availability of the cloud and or swiftness of addressing vulnerabilities that were identified, or perhaps even identifying the vulnerabilities first before we can address them. There's a good first step. And so now what we're seeing is a holistic view of what are the top operational risks for our governments, our enterprises of any size. And that gets back to what Howard is talking about, where there is more of a holistic focus. And to close the point that Matthew added, it also is an opportunity for us to say at some point, there's a line. And here are the risks that we're going to focus our energies on. And here is what falls below. We are aware of them, but we are going to perhaps prioritize them in a different way in terms of how much energy, how much money, and how much time we spend on them. And that can give us a way to shift when you have that list so that you can actually flex, as Matthew and Howard have pointed out. We've seen downturns before. We've seen other events that are cataclysmic, and we all have to be flexible. But having that operational resilience model goes a long way towards helping you turn on a dime.
Yeah, that's a great insight, Edna. In fact, it's very encouraging to see that risk, the appetite for managing risk has increased. However, knowing the reality that we are in today, there are budget cuts. There are cuts of all kinds everywhere in the current downturn, right? People are having leaders are having uncomfortable questions with CFOs of their respective orgs. They're seeing budget cut across tools, across resources, across infra. And it's great that you guys have a very broad view of seeing different companies at different stages and not just one org. Howard, how do you suggest security leaders, tackle this situation where there are budget cuts, as well as resources are being asked to, right size? That's the term that's going around nowadays. How do you suggest this?
So, how many times have you been asked by your senior management, by your leadership team, I know what you asked for the budget, but can you do more with less, right? I mean, that's the ask every year. Everybody gets that, not just security, but other teams, of course. But in my view, it's pretty much a discussion around prioritization, just exactly what Edna said, right? You just gotta have to be a little bit keener on what you prioritize. So what did downturn mean? Downturn means reduction in resources, whether that's budget, whether that's headcount, maybe it's everything, or maybe it's just a reduction in the budget upsize that you requested. You know, maybe you requested $500,000 more, maybe you're only going to get $100,000 more, right? So what I consider first is consider the justification to the CFO, the CEO, COO, to not trim the budget and headcount, right? Think about, have we had any recent major previous security incidents or any bad press, right? That could be a justification to push back on the request for a reduction. Do you have any stiff regulatory requirements, legal requirements, customer contractual requirements that would be impacted by any kind of reduction in terms of your headcount or your resources available? Or anything, any specific direction that was received by the board of directors to increase or at least maintain the current security program, right? Another possible idea is to utilize this request for reduction, you know, in terms of to using that to your advantage. Inform your senior leadership team of the impacts to your security program. If we can't do this, if I can't get that, then this is going to have to get delayed. This can't get done, et cetera, right? There's going to be impacts. Maybe use as leverage when negotiating new contracts with suppliers. Tell your suppliers, you know, I know we're up for renewal, but we can't do a 25% increase. My budget's being reduced. Maybe we could do a 5% increase, right? Because they always want to increase, of course, right? And use a request to reduce budget as a good reason to trim your budget where you've been thinking about it, or you know there's waste, or you know that, you know, you're not getting value or benefit from certain things. This is a good justification to slash things. And I've seen this situation for many clients where they've actually purchased services and systems and infrastructure, but never deployed it, never turned it on, never went through test. I mean, that happens sometimes. And this is a nice reason to just cut that all off. But the bottom line is, you know, you're going to do what you're going to do with respect to risk, right? Your strategy doesn't change. How you mitigate changes, how fast you can mitigate is going to be impacted, and maybe increase the likelihood of delay for mitigation for certain items. Those are for sure going to be the impacts.
Yeah, I love the angle of how you're thinking about it, of getting rid of unwanted shareware, so as to speak, as using this as a good opportunity to do that. That's amazing. I would love some thoughts from Matthew and Edna about, you know, it is a reality. There are times this is a downturn, budgets are cut. You'll struggle. There are companies where you'll struggle to even get the necessary budget that you need to maintain security. What would your suggestions be?
Matthew, why don't you go ahead of me?
All right. So let me talk about two things you don't want to do, and then the one thing that you really need to do. You know, first off, sometimes new CISOs will decide, I need to use fear. I need to go to the board and CISO and talk about all the bad things and drum up all this fear. And you know what? The reality is it might work once or twice, and you might have already played that card once or twice. It's a losing proposition in the long run, and it undermines your reputation. So don't use fear, right? Again, this is about professionally managing the risks, the ambiguity, the surprises, and this is just part of what we need to be doing with. So if you're coming in with the fear message, it shows you're panicking. And you may not be the right person for the role. Okay. The second thing you don't really want to do, other than, you know, fear, is, now I just lost my train of thought. Edna, help me out here. The first one was fear.
You were talking about managing risks, and I know you and I have chatted from time to time as showcasing where what you're doing actually can be a business differentiator. Is that where you were going?
Well, I was going to go into that in what we need to do, but okay. I was thinking, okay, don't use the fear, which many people do. Don't beg, right? A lot of professionals will go in and go, oh no, we have to have this, please, please, please. And again, it might work. There may be some personal currency that you earn with people, but again, This is an opportunity to show how professional your security organization is, how you can adapt to these changes, whether it be a raise in threat and risk, or whether it be pressure on your budget or headcount, right? So this is that opportunity for good managers to step forward and show how they are adaptable. So those are the two things. But getting back to what Edna was touching on, right? The one thing that you do really need to do is you should already, and if you're not doing it before, you should start now. You should be managing by objectives. You should be talking with your executive leadership about what is the right risk level, right? It's not we are 100% invulnerable. That's not possible. And it's probably not we don't need anything. It's somewhere in the middle. And somebody has to say at the executive level, we accept a certain margin of risk. They do it in the business side. They need to be doing it in the cyber side. And once you have that, now you're tying budget and headcount to certain objectives within that space. So when the discussion comes up, we're going to be cutting budget. We need to cut 10%. Great. Let's talk about the elevation of that risk. You want to cut budget? No problem. That means you're willing to accept a higher risk. Let's talk about what areas of risk you're willing to accept at a higher risk. And that will be the new target. And I will prioritize the resources, the headcount, and the funding to hit that new elevated level of risk. And perhaps maybe when budgets are less tight and you might want to bring that down. And I'm going to recommend that you bring that down. But there is a need from the shareholders to the executives to the customers to reduce budget in financial downturns. That's just the reality of life. Great. That means you may be accepting a higher level of risk. They need buy-in on that, right? If your executives don't buy in, yes, we're accepting a higher level of risk because we're reducing your budget. When bad things happen, they're going to blame you. Right? Well, no, we expected to cut your budget. You never said the risk was going to be higher, right? So you have failed in your job. Part of our job is setting that expectation and communicating and getting that buy-in. They're held accountable by the shareholders, stockholders, whatnot. So they have the ability to accept that risk. It is your job to facilitate that discussion.
So, Pritesh, let me offer how that might be done, because I think it's a great observation, and everybody scratches their head and says, what does it look like? You can do it in many different ways. First, to Howard's point, let me put in a plug, not only getting rid of that which is either not being utilized at all or to its optimum or duplicative, right? Sometimes security, I liken it to when you go to the supermarket and you know that you want a breakfast cereal and you know you want that it has to be based on corn. And you walk down the aisle and there's 72 different varieties of cornflakes. And the question is, do I need 72? Oh, good Lord, that one has this one has that. And it's, if you ever tried to go deploy an MDR, for example, there's a lot of flavors of MDR. Which are the differentiators that you want? So one, scale back to Howard's point, not just what you didn't use, but can you scale back? Because many of us use defense in depth, and maybe for a period of time that Matthew's talking about where the risk tolerance goes up. And I want to talk about risk tolerance because those are my words. You scale back on something and you don't have 3 layers. You have 2 layers, or dare I say it, 1 layer. You can do all of this only if you have the objectives that Matthew is talking about. And the way I did it, and in fact, I just came from a meeting with the CEO yesterday, where we're talking about setting tolerance levels against your requirements, your security controls. So I'm going to get, and you can vary those by department. It's a cloud has to hit 98%. For our secure development lifecycle, I have to have 100% all the time, no matter what. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Laudable goal, by the way. I don't know anybody who has a secure development lifecycle that they adhere to 100% of the time. If you're out there, please call me. I'd love to know how you do it. But the reality is you can then go for my suppliers who are giving me X products or services, I'm willing to accept 78% as my tolerance. Now you have something when you walk into the boardroom that's mathematical. Your CFO loves you. And to Matthew's point, you can point out, I hit this, or I love when I walk in and say, I exceeded it. Be careful of that, however, because that's come back to bite me several times. Well, Well, my friend, you exceeded your tolerance level with a reduced set of resources. Thank you for being so efficient. You now need no more resources, right? So always be aware of the list of what you're not doing as well. That's a suggestion that can convert to math, meaning, and flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, some great points. And love the risk tolerance model and setting expectations. So crucial. Instead of selling or begging, if you set the expectations correctly, if you help them show the picture, show the mirror, always a much useful way of doing it. Cool. Just moving on. I think in the interest of time, there is you have certain regulations, compliances to abide by. No matter it's a downturn or not, you still have to do what you have to do. And this seems to be a very popular. There seems to be both sides of the table. But I would love to know from you guys, and maybe Edna, if you want to start it. What is your opinion of compliance and security? Where do you stand on that?
So I have a very clear stance on that. Compliance is not security. I think that a lot of great regulators are trying, in many cases, in partnership with the private sector, to determine what it is that ought to be done. If you tell us what we should do, you're already starting at a fail rate. If you articulate achievable goals and say, I am agnostic as to how you achieve them in the way that's best suited for your business. So if you look, for example, at the NIST cybersecurity framework, which everybody talks about, and we have version 2.0, but it's a maturity model. It doesn't say, and Pritesh, I always tell everybody I'm Italian, so Matthew, you've heard this one, everything's always about food for me. So let's talk about lasagna. You can have lasagna, right? So you're going to tell me I'm going to make a lasagna. Do not tell me that it has to have this particular type of mozzarella, that it has to have this particular type of ricotta. Maybe I have somebody who is lactose intolerant in my family. I will give you lasagna. I will give you lasagna that achieves the goal of a delicious meal, which means I will give you operational resilience at a certain level. But don't tell me in particular how I do it. And it comes to roost in a most glaring example in security in the combination of kinetic and digital. So imagine you're in a manufacturing plant, right? And there's a high value cage that has the most high value, high IP containing, not necessarily cost value, but intellectual property containing, think FPGAs, programmable devices, ASICs, etc., sitting inside there. And I say you need to have complete total custody and inventory control of them. I need to know where they are on that floor at any time. You can have a very sophisticated digital electronic system that monitors that. You can also have somebody standing there with a set of pictures of the 5 people who can remove things from there and put them in a little rolling locked case that's tracked and bring it to the particular place on the manufacturing line where that component is going to be used. Night and day in terms of sophistication level. But answer this question. Are they both effective if utilized in the right way? You bet. Proves to me that you're doing something that achieves the goal. And I think that's where we need to get to, flexibility. And so sometimes regulation, while always well-intended, when it's too prescriptive, can negate the opportunity to rise above baseline compliance and actually soar, to coin an overused term that has different meaning in security, above that compliance level. Matthew, thank you. You got it.
Well, yeah, I mean, lovely. Howard, what about you? I would love to hear maybe more views around this.
So you're asking about, just summarize your question real quickly.
Yeah. What do you think of compliance and security?
Compliance. So they are not the same. They are not the same. I believe there is significant overlap, but I believe that compliance is generally 2 or more years behind today's problems, right? Because let's face it, the compliance frameworks are built around history and it's built up over time, but it's in my view, it's not very much up to date. It's rarely up to date. Okay, they tend to be long review cycles to do updates and things like that, and they could be honestly 2, 3, 4 years behind the current issues or problems that we have. I mean, let's face it, when ransomware started hitting hard and really got on people's radar, where was compliance with respect to ransomware? It wasn't anywhere near there, right? They were just talking about malware in general, not specifically around the problem of ransomware. So it's going to be behind. And I think there's good intentions on it, and I think it generally hits the mark overall. Just don't expect perfection, because it's not a 100% overlap. That's my view.
And I would reiterate, what Edna said, regulatory compliance tends to be one of those goals that you're trying to achieve, but in the bigger picture, it's a lower goal. Normally the security goals are much higher. The expectation of your customers, partners, shareholders, executives, they're much higher than what comes in at regulatory compliance. Now, it is an important business aspect that should be part of the cybersecurity goal structure. That should be one of your goals. But again, tell us what to achieve, not necessarily how to achieve it. Because we do need to be able to flex and bend and drive efficiency while being effective. And as Howard said, it takes a while to get regulations in place. The bureaucracy alone takes years and years. So whatever you are complying with, great. Yes, that is beneficial to you, but it's far and away from probably where you want or need to be. So yes, you do need to comply with regulations, definitely do that, but the job is not done. That's the beginning. That's your first step on a 1,000-mile journey. Great that you've done that, but don't dwell on it. You should have other objectives that are much, much higher that you need to do. You still need to be able to audit and attest to the compliance, but you've got a lot more risk management to do.
Amazing. Yeah, I think I can resonate with that. All the thoughts here. I always love listening to how security leaders think about security and compliance. But there are a lot of companies who do not know where to start, and for them, I think the frameworks provide a very solid baseline or guideline of how to incorporate security into their organizations. Extremely helpful for such organizations, right? But as rightly said, that's just the beginning of your security journey. I think we're almost at the clock. I wanted to ask so many more questions to each of you, but it's been lovely listening to your thoughts from across the space. I have a couple of questions, from the chat here, and maybe we can take those and then see if we have more time to move forward. The first one I could see. I'll just go to the CNA chat here. How could we deal with new forms of ransomware? Any ideas or suggestions? It's from Mehrdad.
Yeah, I've got a solution for ransomware, right? If you criminalize the payment of it, you gut the motivation, right? Ransomware people are financially motivated. If you remove the element of them getting paid, the vast majority of ransomware actually goes away. Now, there's a lot of things that you have to do to get to that stage. It isn't just write a law and you're done. But with a strategic plan, yes, you can actually undermine the motivation of the attacker so they move on to other types of attacks that we are better capable of handling and managing.
Got it. Yep. Thanks, Matthew. There's another one. And this goes earlier to the previous question around budget. Are there any risks versus impact modeling that can help CISO feel more confident with the budget allocation that they are doing? This question is from Shamoon.
So let me try. In tolerance level model, you actually identify a set of controls and where you want to get. You could have correlated to that what the potential some based on, to Howard's point, we have a lot of history, although quite frankly, attackers are always incredibly innovative and they're far more organized than we are. The defenders are way behind on information sharing. But you could have a number that articulates what the kind of impact would be. I'll give you one example because I'm hard over as we move to digital, and particularly as we think about the inclusion of hybrid cloud environments and utilization of, you're using somebody else's computer, right? I mean, and I came from one of the big three hyperscalers. Howard, I'm sure you see in this, as is Matthew, and the clients. But the reality is, what do you know about it, and how are you actually asking questions about it is something that you really need to think about. And I think Howard actually offered whoever asked the question to connect on LinkedIn. So that was very gracious. There are a number of things you can do, and you can associate numbers with each of those controls. I don't know that there's a model out there that I've seen proposed. I've certainly used them, but you create them in the context of your business, because you have to know what the impact is in your business. And not everything has the same impact in every environment.
Yeah, there's several models out there you can use, but as Edna said, there is no one unified model that everybody uses. Every sector, and I would argue even every company, really needs to kind of approach their security measures and metrics. You've got FAIR, you've got TARA, you've got Octave. There's all sorts of different risk matrices. There's also risk maturity models. There's ROI and ROSI, return on security investment, calculations and models that you can use as tools. There isn't one silver bullet out there, though. As Edna said, you really need to read the room. You need to know what your objectives are. You need to fight your battles selectively, because you will not win them all. And focus your energy on the prioritization, just as Howard was saying. Be efficient, prioritize, right? And figure out how you're going to effectively communicate to your C-suite, to your board, so that they are empowered to make the right business decisions. You're the cybersecurity expert. They don't know this stuff, right? So you have to communicate in their terms so that they can absorb that and then make the right decision for the organization. There are other tools and methodologies and things that you can use in your toolbox.
So true. There are many available, but if there's something that they can use as a start, that's a great. At least have a starting point with one model. Try and experiment within your organization what works better for you, and then choose something that works for you.